The taxi driver. It was time to leave Buckingham Palace, anyway, because Daddy wanted to go to the hotel. "We'll take a taxi," he said. "Have a wash and a rest, and then get ready to see London by night. Agreed?" Jeremy James agreed, except for the bit about the wash. That was another silly grown-up idea. When you got up, you had to have a wash. When you went out, you had to have a wash. When you came home, you had to have a wash. When you went to bed, you had to have a wash. Jeremy James reckoned that if he kept on washing whenever he was told to wash, pretty soon he'd finish up with no face left to wash. And then what would they do? "Look, Mummy and Daddy," he'd say, "I haven't got any face." "Oh," they'd say, "who are you?" "I'm Jeremy James," he'd say. "Well, Jeremy James," they'd say, "go and wash your blank space." Washing was a waste of soap, a waste of water, and a waste of face. Jeremy James and Daddy stood by the roadside, and Daddy waved to a taxi. But the taxi took no notice. Another taxi came, and Daddy waved again. And the second taxi took about as much notice as the first taxi. A third and a fourth taxi also went by. But when Jeremy James helped Daddy to wave at the fifth taxi, the people sitting in it waved back. "They were nice," said Jeremy James. At last an empty taxi drew up beside them, and they climbed in. "Hotel Jeremy, please," said Daddy to the taxi driver, who was a thin man with glasses on his nose, stubble on his chin, and a flat cap on his head. "Hotel Jeremy," repeated the driver. "Never heard of it." "It's in Jeremy Street," said Daddy. "Jeremy Street," repeated the taxi driver. "Never heard of it." "It's very near Welbeck Street," said Daddy. "Welbeck Street," repeated the taxi driver. "Where's that?" Well," said Daddy. "I wish you'd people pick places I've heard of," grumbled the taxi driver. "I'm sick of people going to places I don't know. Makes my job very difficult." "Sorry," said Daddy, "but I thought since you were a taxi driver—" "Yes," said the taxi driver. Everybody thinks that because you're a taxi driver, you must know everything. Where's this place they are? Where's that place? And someone this morning asked me the quickest way to Highgate Cemetery. I told him the quickest way was to jump under a bus. Now then." He pulled out a book and took off his glasses, muttered, "Welbeck Street, Welbeck Street, Welbeck Street," and began to flick through the pages. "Welbeck Street," he said. "Got it. What was the other street?" "Jeremy Street," said Daddy. "Jeremy Street, Jeremy Street, Jeremy Street," said the taxi driver. "Jeremy Street. Got it. Is that where you want to go?" "Yes, please." Couldn't have picked a much smaller street, could you? No wonder I've never heard of it." They set off through the streets of London. As the taxi dodged in and out of the traffic, the driver kept telling Daddy what terrible drivers all the other drivers were. Daddy said it must be a really difficult job, and the taxi driver said he'd only been doing it for 3 days, and if the next 3 days were as bad as his first 3 days, he wouldn't be doing it for much longer. "London," he said, "it's full of people who don't know where they're going, and drivers who don't know what they're doing." "Daddy never knows where he's going," said Jeremy James. I do know where I'm going," said Daddy. "I just don't know how to get there." "I've got the same problem," said the taxi driver. "I don't know how I managed to pass me taxi driving test, 'cause I ain't got no sense of direction." Daddy asked him what he'd been doing before he became a taxi driver. "I was a tourist guide," he said. "I had that job for 3 days and all. Took a party of tourists to Hampton Court and lost them in the maze." Jeremy James asked Daddy what a maze was, and he explained that it had a lot of paths that led to a place you couldn't get out of. Jeremy James asked if London was a maze, and Daddy said it was worse than a maze because it was just as difficult to get in as to get out. Yeah, not to mention getting round, said the taxi driver, pulling into the curb. I'm lost. And he pulled out his book. Now, where was it you wanted to go? He asked. Daddy, said Jeremy James, isn't that our car park over there? So it is, said Daddy. Oh, said the driver, found it, have I? Pretty nearly, said Daddy. This'll do anyway. Well, fancy that, said the driver. Must be me lucky day. Daddy and Jeremy James got out, and Daddy paid before they said goodbye to the driver and set off towards the car park. When Jeremy James looked back, the taxi was still there, and the driver had taken off his glasses and was looking at his book. Do you think he'll find his way home? Asked Jeremy James. No, said Daddy. And do you think we'll find our way to the hotel? No, said Jeremy James. But before they didn't find their way to the hotel, Daddy wanted to fetch the cases from the car, and that meant finding the car. This might not have been quite so difficult if Daddy had remembered which floor it was on. Jeremy James remembered that it was in a space between two other cars, but for a long time they couldn't find the space or the other two cars. When at last they did find it, Jeremy James realised that the space had been filled. Daddy's car was in it. They took out their bags, and then Daddy asked the car park attendant the way to Jeremy Street. Fortunately, it was only 2 minutes' walk away. And so, in exactly 10 minutes, after Daddy had turned left instead of right, they found themselves outside a tall, dark building with a big sign over the door that read, Hotel Jeremy.